Most people have memories of their school days. Some memories are good, some not so good. For example, how familiar were you or are you with the principal's office? Ever been there for something you didn't want to be? Principals are nice people. I know. I've been a teacher. They're helpful. They care a lot about the teachers and the students. But they're also watchful. They don't want students to get into bad habits, like coming late all the time, skipping out on assignments, fighting in the hallways, and cheating. Cheating's something you can get into as a young person, and it leads to big trouble later on. Here's a guy who found out the hard way.
A wise man in the Bible once said, "Bread gained by deceit tastes sweet to a man, but he ends up with a mouthful of grit."
We'll be back after this. Teachers are often in a dilemma with their students. They want to be friends with them, but they also know that strange things can take place behind their backs, like cheating on exams. It might seem like an innocent little activity, but it can lead to problems later on. Like, can you imagine what it would be like to have a doctor who's not honest with you? Or an airport flight controller who never learned math properly? Or a mechanic who sloughs off while fixing the brakes on your car? Here's a teacher who talks about his experiences.
Two ways in which students cheat that come to mind are on tests and on assignments. There's much more testing than used to be in the past, and students have to cope with that situation. One of the ways of coping, of course, is to try to get answers to the tests without learning the answers. The student is also helped along in this behavior because many of the tests are short answer and they're computer scored. So two students sitting close together can easily cheat one from the other. And that means that if we are to prevent this situation, we have to separate them some distance so that they can't see the neighbor's answer sheet. The second way, of course, is by written assignments that they do at home or also in school and then hand in for evaluation and for marks. There they have the opportunity to enlist the help of just about anybody who is willing to help them and pass it off as their own work. And we find very often that older brothers and sisters do some or all of the work for the younger ones, or even parents assist them. And that's a serious problem because they are evaluated on work that somebody else has done. Given enough time, I suppose the problem of cheating in school is going to affect all of society. If the majority of people consider cheating as a legitimate a way of coping with problems or with a task, and then that becomes the norm, then of course the fabric of society is affected in a negative fashion. If we think of communication, in the case of a control tower directing planes, if the pilot has to wonder whether he is given factual information or not, that of course could lead to a great disaster. I believe part of the problem of cheating in schools is parents insisting that their children do well in school. Parents want their children to get into careers. They want them in jobs that pay well. And so we find that parents do insist that students, perhaps not able to, are forced to take courses that are too difficult for them. And some of the two students are in tears because they're forced to do that. So in order to cope, they have to find ways and means of getting the grades, the marks that will enable them to live in some kind of peace with themselves and with their parents. If we're talking about changed behavior, I think we're talking about something that is quite radical. Once the habits are established, it's rather difficult to change them. I think in order to change cheating ways, a student has to come to the conclusion that what he's doing is not acceptable or that it is wrong. The price to pay because of cheating is too high, or morally what I'm doing is wrong. He has to come to that conclusion. Studies indicate that parents are the best models for children. Where the children learn to cheat. I'm sure every time that a parent cheats on his income tax and brags about it, that does not go without notice to the children. Or when a family stops at a motel and cheats, lies about the number of people in the party in order to get a reduced rate, and that is taken out of by the children. There are so many ways that we as adults cheat that give the message to the younger ones, to the children, that it is all right to do it. A number of the Ten Commandments deal, at least indirectly, with the problem of dishonesty. And so we can safely say that God hates the practice of cheating. And as far as God's word is concerned, there are penalties attached to cheating, to the practice of cheating. Jacob was a young man and cheated his brother and his father, and it seemed that he got away for it for a time. But later in life, of course, it caught up with him. He, in turn, was deceived by his own children, and he found it very painful to be cheated and also to be reminded what he himself had done in his youth. As students who work hard to achieve the marks without cheating have a satisfaction that the cheaters do not have. But they can honestly say, I did this. If I get an A on this test, this is my achievement. This is not somebody else's. When a piece of written work is handed in and it is practically flawless, they can say, this is what I achieved, and they can have a satisfaction and also, of course, have a clear conscience that there was nothing dubious about what they did at all.
Cheating is really a selfish thing to do. It happens when you are willing to do wrong or risk hurting another person in order to benefit yourself. An extreme form of cheating is when you take something for yourself that belongs to someone else. It's called stealing. It's been done for as long as there have been people on this earth. And that's why locks were invented already many years ago. Here's how it happened.
People have always liked to keep what they own. That's why locks have been around for thousands of years. The Greeks used an awkward system 4,000 years ago. They placed a wooden bolt in front of their doors, like this. That in itself isn't so unusual, but it was inside the house. That meant someone always had to stay home to open the door when the rest of the family came home. They got tired of that method and eventually placed the wooden bolt on the outside and fastened it with a rope and a secret knot. The Egyptians used a paddle which had wooden pins in it, which fell into place. This was similar to our locks today. In the Middle Ages, a group of people living in northern Italy invented locks that used keys that were specially cut. This meant that only a certain key would open the lock. These were not very secure locks because keys could be made to undo them. Even a piece of wire could do the job. In 1849, Linus Yale Jr. developed the pin tumbler lock. He'd been working with his dad on bank locks when he came up with his own new lock. Actually, it wasn't new. The Egyptians with their wooden pins had already used the same idea. The pin tumbler lock has two cylinders. The one on the outside is called the shell, and the one on the inside is called the plug. There's a narrow space between the two cylinders called the shear line. Both cylinders have from 4 to 6 pins in them. These pins are opposite each other. Each shell pin has a spring behind it. Springs force the pins through the shear line and into the plug cylinder. This keeps the plug cylinder from turning. In other words, the lock is locked. The key has a jagged edge. When it's inserted into the lock, it pushes the plug pins back. If you're able to see inside, you notice that all the plug pins are different lengths, while the shell pins are all the same. If it's the wrong key, the plug pins will be moved, but they won't make an even line with the shear line. And the lock will remain locked. If it's the right key, its bumps will push the pins up and make them in line with the shear line. This means the cylinder can be turned and the lock will open. This type of lock is the most common lock in use today. Locks symbolize a problem that has been around for as long as people have had property to protect. There always seems to be someone out there who wants to cheat people out of what is legitimately theirs.
We'll be back after this. The scary thing about doing what is wrong is that often the same thing comes back to haunt you later on. What you do to others, others do back to you, or they learn from you. Like in this Bible story about Jacob.
A man in the Bible had twin sons. Esau was born first, and that made him a few minutes older than his twin brother Jacob. Now in Bible times they had a custom where the oldest son in the family inherited a double portion of his father's possessions. This meant that when their father died, Esau would get 2/3 of the inheritance, and Jacob would get only 1/3. One day, when the father was very old, he called Esau to his bedside and asked him to get ready for a special meeting where they would talk about the future. "I'm a blind old man now and expect to die most any day," he said. "Take your bow and arrows out into the fields and shoot a deer. prepare it just the way I like it and bring it here for me to eat. Then I will give you the blessings that belong to you, my firstborn son, before I die." In the meantime, Jacob the younger twin heard about what was happening. He went out quickly and made a meat stew of his own. He put on some of his brother's clothes with the smell of the outdoors on them. But he had another problem. Being an indoors kind of guy, he didn't have the strong, hairy arms his brother had. So he covered them with goatskin. He carried the platter of food in to where his father lay. "Who is it, my son Esau or Jacob?" the father asked uncertainly. "It's Esau," Jacob lied. "Here's the dish you asked for." "How were you able to get it so soon?" the father asked. "God put it in my path," he said. The blind old man felt his son's arms and smelled his clothes. "The voice is Jacob's, but the hands are Esau's," he said wonderingly. Finally, he took the stew and ate it. When he was done, he took his youngest son close to himself and affirmed him by promising him a special future. "May God always give you plenty of rain for your crops. May all your relatives bow low before you," he said. As soon as Jacob left the room, the real Esau came in with the real stew. "Who is it?" the father asked. "Why, it's me, of course, your oldest son Esau," he insisted. "Then who was I just talking to?" asked the father. He realized that he had been tricked. A blessing like the one he had just given his youngest son Jacob was serious, even if it was gotten under false pretenses. It could not be taken back or exchanged. When all was said and done, the father gave Esau a promise too. But it wasn't nearly as strong as the first one. Esau would always have to be treated as the second son in line. As for Jacob, he went away happy with what he had gotten. For the moment, that is. Not surprisingly, there was a bitter rivalry between him and his brother Esau for years to come. And people gave him a name, the cheater. The time came when even his own children played mean tricks on him, when he was an old man too, just like his father.
One of the reasons we cheat is because we think everyone else is doing it. So it's popular and therefore it must be okay. We would do well to take a lesson from the manhole cover. It never cares about popularity. It takes a lot of abuse and just lies there day after day, faithfully doing its job, no matter what people think of it.
City life, where everything hums along normally. Traffic flows smoothly. People cross the streets at crosswalks, and city councilors hold their meetings. Now there's a reason why everything goes so well, and nobody ever thinks about it. It's because of the manhole covers. Yes, those cold, ugly steel covers over yucky sewers that quietly and faithfully do their job. They don't mind being stepped on, squealed on, and rubbed on. They humbly lie there inside of their steel rims day after day, doing what they were made to do. Everyone takes them for granted. Can you think of anything more thankless and lonely? Now imagine what it would be like if this faithful legion of lids decided to go off the job. You don't have to worry. It won't happen. No matter what people think of them, these humble guardians of the sewers work faithfully. Truly exemplary, day after day. Let's hear it for the manhole covers.
We'll be back after this. God cares about how we live. He's especially concerned about our honesty. Repeatedly in the Bible, He warns against being untruthful. But if we've done wrong, He welcomes us to come to Him and confess our sins. We should also confess to the people we've wronged. He's happy to give a new start through His Son, Jesus, to anyone who comes to Him and asks. That's a great privilege.
Lying on my bed, there is trouble in my head. I remember how the paper read. Life is just a game and survival is the aim. It doesn't matter how you get ahead. Cheating is okay if it helps you on the way, but be careful that you don't get caught. Who's to say what's wrong? Where does morality belong when survival is the only law? Still the game goes on. Worked so hard and now I'm growing old. Am I a slave to my genetic code? Have I been running down a dead-end road? If you care to read a unique philosophy where you're caught by your heredity, you will find that love is the selfish product of a person's drive to pass along his genes. God is just a crutch for the paranoid and such, those who can't accept the way they are. If that's really true, then I'm nothing but a fool, 'cause you know I'm one who's leaning hard. Still the game goes on. Worked so hard and now I'm growing old. Am I a slave to my genetic code? Have I been running down a dead-end road? God is just a crutch for the paranoid and such, those who can't accept the way they are. If that's really true, then I'm nothing but a fool, 'cause you know I'm one who's leaning hard.
We'd like to hear from you at the Third Story. When you write, we'll send you a free survival kit, something to help you get to know God better. It includes a poster with Bible verses on it, a Bible study book with a book of the Bible, a book of cartoons and stories, and a helpful book of Bible verses for the whole family. Write for your free kit to The Third Story, Box 2, Station F, Winnipeg, Manitoba. That's The Third Story, Box 2, Station F, Winnipeg, Manitoba. We'll be waiting to hear from you.